provide opening comments.
Well, thanks, Kim. Thanks everyone for joining us here in the second week of session. I think there's not a lot new to talk about that we didn't talk about last week. Top issue with Washingtonians across across the state is still affordability, and we're looking at every bill that comes across at least our desks with a view towards what's it going to do to the ability of folks in Washington to afford food, gas, housing, childcare, healthcare, and many other things that make life in Washington possible. While that is going on, we're not hearing a whole lot about the budget. We did hear, of course, the governor's budget a few days ago, and heard got a lot of feedback on that. I think it's kind of a mixed bag. We have a lot to do to make sure we live within our means. What is striking that in spite of the absolute disaster that our budget is in as a result of overspending by the Democratic majorities, there's very little talk about it from members of the caucus or willingness to take it on. Instead, they're talking about and quietly introduced, at least to the business community last night, is a draft of an income tax that is 100%, in my estimation, a small business income tax. This is a tax that goes directly after small companies in the forms of LLCs and S corps, and will drive them out of the state or just plain out of business. This is bad in every imaginable way, and of course is opposed to the long historic opposition by the people of the state of Washington, and characterizing it as something that only goes after a certain set of individuals does not make it any more so, especially when the actual words say this will put small business out of business across our state or move them into other states across the country. Lots of other bad bills to talk about, a few good bills to talk about, but I'll stop right there and turn it over to my colleague, Representative Stokesbury, on the other side of the rotunda.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Braun. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Happy day 9 of session. I don't have a lot to add. Senator Braun's right. There hasn't been a ton of things going on since we talked to you all last week. But I will point out, we're now day 9 of session. On her opening day speech, the speaker talked about affordability. In his State of the State remarks, the governor spoke about affordability. They tried to blame it on President Trump, sort of forgetting the fact that Washington has been very unaffordable since Joe Biden was president. But more importantly, and more to the point for this week, 9 days in a session, and there still aren't any Democrat bills moving that address the affordability crisis, and there are lots of Republican bills that would address the affordability crisis that Democrats are refusing to give hearings to. Perhaps the most offensive in a darkly funny way bill is a bill by Representative Partially out of Olympia that would impose a new tire fee to deal with mitigation of the impacts of a complicated and difficult to pronounce chemical in tires. So again, how are we helping affordability by making drivers pay a new fee to the state for every tire they get? But more alarmingly, the bill not only prohibits tire sellers the bill prohibits tire sellers from informing customers about that tax. The bill says that it's illegal for the seller of tires to tell their customers that they're going to pay this tax. So Democrats not only are making life more unaffordable, but now they're trying to hide the ball and make it so consumers don't realize what Olympia politicians are doing to make everyday essentials like tires more expensive. As Senator Braun pointed out, one of the things going on behind the scenes right now is a draft of the Democrats' income tax bill is circulating. And he's absolutely right. This would devastate small businesses. I also think devastate a lot of other sectors of the state's economy. There's a really complicated, it's not that complicated, but it sounds complicated, tax policy involving what's known as loss carry forwards. Basically says if you lose money in one year, you get to apply that loss in a future year. Federal tax policy recognizes these. The state income tax would disallow you to carry forward losses. That might sound complicated or not a big deal, but what it means is any sort of capital-intensive business that has losses in the early years and profits in the later years would never get credit for the losses they incur as they build up to the profits. What sector does this probably hit the hardest? The housing sector. We're in the middle of a housing crisis, and Democrats want to impose an income tax on the folks who are deploying capital to build the housing we desperately need, and to disincentivize their investment in those projects by prohibiting loss carry forwards. Just an unbelievably adolescent view of tax policy and will do absolutely more harm than good if we ever want to solve the state's housing crisis, and more broadly, if we want to continue Washington's economic powerhouse. We cannot be messing with tax policy and doing things like prohibiting loss carry forwards that will just immediately dry up capital investment here in Washington. I should have mentioned at the outset, we have also joining us from the House, Representative April Connors, our House Republican floor leader. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Terrific, thank you. So we will start with Jerry Cornfield from the Washington State Standard. Jerry, do you have any questions today?
Good morning, thank you. Two questions for, I guess, Senator Braun and Representative Stokesbury. First, you're meeting with Governor Ferguson later today. It looks like it's one of the first formal meetings of the session. So I guess I wonder, what questions do you have for the governor? What requests do you have of the governor? What do you want to accomplish in this meeting? And then secondly, just because you mentioned Representative Stokesbury, have either of you seen a draft that's circulating of the income tax bill?
Yeah, so I guess I'll jump in there. So, yeah, first meeting of the session. I expect it'll largely be just cordial and get things, kind of get started meeting. Although I plan to press on both budget issues, and I've had some discussion with the governor and provide some feedback on his proposed budget. And there's some one or two good things and some things that I think do considerable harm. We'll talk about that. I'm certain we'll talk about the income tax, and I'm curious to hear from the governor how he intends to preside over a state that has folks fleeing left and right as a result of an income tax that's going to put small business out of business. So I'm super curious to see how he came to that conclusion for a person who seems, claims to care about representing the people and the democratic process, to ignore the repeated opposition to income tax and the undeniable economic impact of this sort of a proposal. So and the last thing I would say is he has said on a couple occasions he will only do this if there's some tax relief for small businesses. But we've yet to see anything that's really meaningful. Everything is just words. Words that, saying that we're going to protect small businesses is not the same as actually protecting small businesses. So I expect that will be the discussion. And yes, there was a copy of a draft copy of the income tax bill that was released to the business community. It wasn't actually sent to me, at least. Maybe it was sent to Representative Stokesbury. But we did get a copy, and we have looked at it. I have looked at it.
Yeah, I'll echo what Senator Braun said. I also got a copy yesterday. It was not sent to me directly by the Democrat leadership that's circulating it, but it was sent to me by another member of the Democratic caucus. So I've looked at it as well, and that kind of informed my comments on, among other things, the very problematic issues with disallowing loss carry forwards. As for our meeting with the governor, again, like Senator Braun said, I think we'll talk a lot about the budget. I introduced a bill the other day, my first bill of this entire term. I didn't introduce any bills last session. I've got my hands full with caucus leadership obligations. But we found an ability to save the state about $10 million a biennium by consolidating the investment office at University of Washington and having their endowment be invested through the State Investment Board, which over the long term has achieved better investment returns for much lower fees. And so by shifting that function away from UW's dedicated endowment office and over to the State Investment Board, we can save taxpayers about $10 million a year. Certainly won't solve the budget crisis entirely, but every little bit helps, and it's absolutely something we should be looking at. We've got a couple other budget savings ideas. Like Senator Braun said, I think we'll talk a lot about the income tax. I want to understand what has led his transformation over the last 365 days to oppose a wealth tax and give all the reasons why that would really hamstring Washington's economy, and then less than a year later decide that an income tax is not a problem at all. So I want to understand his logic there, and to the extent this is something that Democrats are insistent on passing, we got to figure out how to make it the least impactful to Washington. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll be talking about some of the details. And then the last thing on my end, we've got a transportation crisis out in my district. We've got a bridge that DOT didn't bother warning anybody about, was about to fail for decades, and now it's failed, and it's depriving all of Washington the ability to access one of the state's crown jewels of Mount Rainier. And more importantly, it is just absolutely devastating the local economies of a couple towns, a couple of very small towns in East Pierce County. So we need some relief there. So those are a couple of things we'll be talking about from my end.
Great, terrific. Jerry, was that it for you?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, next I'll turn to Carlene Johnson from the Center Square. Carlene, go ahead with your question.
Good morning. Thanks, Kim. My question might go to the hearing this afternoon on Senate Bill 5973. This is the one to, I guess, make the initiative process even a bigger challenge. Any of you have thoughts on that bill? Obviously, we've heard that we're not going to get hearings on either of the initiatives to the legislature that are currently sitting here. They're going to punt those to the ballot. What are your thoughts on this bill, 5973?
Anti-democratic. It's a continued effort of by the Democratic majority to hide from the public when it comes to actual policies that people care about when they get up each day. These are very popular cross-partisan line initiatives, and in their response is to not only not hear them, but make it more difficult for the people to present initiatives to the legislature in the future. 100% anti-democratic and and at odds with the clear intent of the state's constitution.
Yeah, it's just such schizophrenic messaging from Democrats. You know, they say, oh, you know, we're going to send these initiatives to the ballot, and we're confident voters will reject them. They were confident, and albeit turned out to be correct that voters were going to voters rejected the three initiatives that made it to the ballot 2 years ago. But at the same time, you know, they want to stack the deck too. They want to change the rules on how the ballot title is formulated. Now they want to make it harder to qualify initiatives in the first place. Doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're confident the voters are with you on policy, why do you need to make it harder for folks who disagree to put the question before voters if you know voters are going to ultimately side with your idea? And I think it's also part of a broader theme where Olympia politicians want to blame other people and disclaim their own fault and their own role in the process. The same attitude that says we should make it really, really difficult for citizens to put initiatives on the ballot is the exact same attitude driving the House Bill 2421 I mentioned a second ago, where we're going to raise taxes on tires and prohibit tire sellers from telling their customers that their taxes just got raised. All part of the same theme, which I think is awfully chilling for democracy. And there's an irony that the folks who cry loudest about chilling democracy are the ones in this state chilling it the most.
You're muted.
I'm gonna just pipe in, Carlene. I don't have the testifying list for that bill in front of me. I've been following mostly the House bills, but typically in the past, even our Secretary of State has been opposed to changes to the initiatives. So I think if we'll take a look at that and get back to you on that. But I think that's important to note when we have our Secretary of State's office saying the process is working, it's okay, we shouldn't be making these changes. We should be listening to our Democrat Secretary of State on those items.
Yeah, I believe Secretary Hobbs and former Secretary Reed testified together in the Senate.
I just wanted a quick follow-up on that. I heard some suggestions that I know you get a longer time frame to gather signatures if you go to the legislature first versus gathering to just going straight to the ballot. But given the recent history of lawmakers here just sort of undoing the will of the people, maybe all these initiatives should just go directly to the people, and then they're safe for 2 years anyway. I don't know, just a thought. I don't know what either of you have thoughts on that, or any of you.
The Constitution provides both options. I think it depends on the situation, but I'm certainly not opposed to them coming directly to the legislature. I'm just opposed to the way that the Democratic majority leaders are dismissive of the will or the desires of the people.
Carlene, did you have a follow-up question?
Any thoughts on I think there's only one bill alive yet. I think Senator Wellman's bill is not going to get a hearing, I've been told. as far as making it more difficult to access public records for DCYF providers. But I think Senator Wilson's bill is still alive that would maybe water down the oversight board a bit, certainly, and change the name of the oversight board to the accountability board because somebody was offended by the word oversight. Any of you have any comments on that?
So I'm sort of indifferent on the name. They can name it whatever they want. What I care about is that it actually does something. And the reality is we put this board in place, I think, in 2017 to provide some level of real, effort by the legislature and others to hold the agency accountable. In spite of efforts by, some good people on that board, we failed. The agency is out of control across the board, whether it's juvenile rehabilitation, which I've talked about a lot, or child protective services, or foster care, or managing our child care system. They have failed in many cases dramatically on virtually every front. So I don't think the name matters at all. What we need is a board that really has some ability to move things in a good direction in that agency, or a governor that's going to get really involved and take a hand in getting it back on the right track.
And I'll just add, in addition to the oversight responsibility that we've got, there's also an underlying issue with the sort of substantive law and the standards for how DCYF is operating in these situations. We've got to fix this imminent harm standard, which turns out to not really be applied in a way that is actually saving kids' lives. Travis Couture has a bill, House Bill 1092, that would actually effectively fix this issue. It was introduced last session. This is just brutally sad, but had the legislature passed that bill last session, more than one child in the state's care would be alive right now who isn't. That's pretty inexcusable to play partisan politics over this. So we've got to take action, not just on avoiding watering down our oversight responsibility, but we've got to fix the underlying law too. And I don't think Republicans care who gets credit for the bill, but I know that we've got a bill that would fix a lot of the problems, and I think Democrats should take it seriously, and I hope they do.
And I agree with that. I was on that oversight board, but with added responsibility, I stepped off. But we need to look at what's happening, especially with our foster kids, or the kids that have been removed from a home. When we find a 9-year-old boy living in a tent on the street in Seattle, and it's the judge's prerogative to leave him there with drugs and other activities going on. Something's wrong. Something's wrong with our system if that happens.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Carlene. And next we will go to Jonathan Martin. Jonathan, are you prepared with a question today?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the tort liability issue. I saw Dingra and Peterson drop a bill to create basically a civil claims process for the bills. I know Senator Braun, you and I have talked about this issue. What are your plans this session for dealing with not just the deficit that it's running, but the structural problem?
So I haven't studied the bill. I'm familiar with the idea. I'm not necessarily, what I know of it, I'm not necessarily opposed to simplifying and perhaps reducing the cost of some of these claims. That's not the underlying issue. The underlying issue is we have repeatedly seen the state fail with people, specifically children, in their care over many years, and some of these claims go back many years or even decades. But a lot of them are happening more recently, and I can tell you, just based on my experience with juvenile rehabilitation, there's a whole host of claims that have occurred that probably haven't even been filed yet, based on activities at Green Hill in particular in the last couple of years. So, I think Republicans have been talking about some type of tort reform for a long, long time. It's hard to believe, without knowing exactly the details, it's hard to believe we would be opposed. But the underlying issue is the state is failing in an enormous and tragic way when it comes to caring with people in our, people that we're responsible for, and we got to do better there. We can't just, fix the cost. We should fix the real problem underneath. That's where the true problem is, and true and as I've said before, it's often tragic and often involves small children.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I pointed this out at the AP pre-session media thing. I think part of the problem is structural. You've got the same political party who's been responsible for all of the senior appointments in government since literally the day I was born. 40 years of single party rule means that you're not going to have new ideas. You're not going to have old ideas challenged. You're not going to have accountability, and I think that's been a huge structural problem, and part of why we've been failing so much in our responsibility in terms of the folks under our care. I mentioned a second ago in the context of Colleen's question, one of the areas where the state has failed the most recently is DCYF. I noted that there's a Travis Couture bill that I think would get at some of those underlying issues and allow us to do a better job of getting kids out of harmful situations before they become tragic and before the state incurs liability. So in addition to actually avoiding liability in the first place, which I think has to do with management, the other thing I'll point out, Senator Brown's talked about this too, we've got to focus our hiring and staffing efforts on frontline workers. We've not really grown our frontline workers in many agencies, but we really have grown our middle management ranks. It ought to be the opposite. We ought to have as few middle managers as possible and as many frontline workers as possible, and I think that would help the problem. Other than avoiding the incurring liability in the front end, the other big structural issue is we've got a very generous system of joint and several liability in Washington State, where the state can be liable for up to 100% of damages when we're only 1% at fault. There's a fundamental unfairness to the state and taxpayers in that regard. I hope that someday we can get in a position where we talk about reforming that. In the meantime, I think the smallest baby step we can take this session realistically is House Bill 2255, which is actually a Democrat bill sponsored by Amy Wallen, although our caucus's Representative Jim Walsh is a co-sponsor. That would at least require, it wouldn't change joint and several liability, but would at least require disclosure of who's financing litigation efforts. And I think that might be a very tiny baby step towards a little bit more fairness in our tort system.
Thank you.
Jonathan, do you have a follow-up call? Or I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do have one other follow-up. Yeah, okay. Related to the 340B issue, the drug pricing issue, wondering where your caucuses are at on that issue.
Well, this is a complicated issue, and I think we're just starting the conversation, and it has both a potential short-term and long-term impact. The hospitals who we've supported very strongly in the past have concerns about the 340B program or FQHCs around the state. Certainly the one in my district, or one of the ones in my district, is very concerned about what it will do for their ability to afford uncovered care in the future. At the same time, there is some evidence that of misuse of the 340B program, meaning contracting with pharmacies across the country when there's not a clear connection between the medical care these hospitals or FQHCs are providing and the pharmacy, and thereby just using that as a way to extract more money out of a program. And you have to understand when they do that, that cost doesn't really come from the pharmaceutical companies. It comes from private payers. It comes from missed rebates for Medicaid. So this is a very, very complicated issue. It's an issue that I am very concerned if we don't handle it correctly. Ultimately, this discussion will be taken to the federal level, and the 340B program will be reconfigured in ways that are bad for hospitals and FQHCs, and ultimately bad for our citizens. So it's very complicated. I think we'd like to see hospitals in better financial shape. I'm not sure the bill in front of us is the right bill to address the fundamental issue.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks for asking about this. I mean, it's complicated, and I can't imagine there's a lot of regular people sitting at home that are like casting their vote or things like that based on 340B. But like Senator Brown said, it's going to affect regular people, and it's important the legislature gets it right. And so I appreciate you taking an interest in it, and I hope it's something you talk about, because I think it's something where everybody ought to weigh in, and the public ought to understand, how challenging some of these issues are. as Senator Brown pointed out, hospitals have been just absolutely hammered the last couple of years, and I think that is part of the impetus for this bill. They've been hammered in this state by the policies passed by Democrats. The PEB and SEB price cap bill, PEB and SEB being the state's public sector health insurance plans, by capping what the state would reimburse, that costs hospitals to the tune of like $180 million a year. There is a B&O surcharge that hit several hospitals that is going to cost hospitals $60 million a year. The cut to Medicaid MCOs is going to result in Medicaid MCOs increasing prices on hospitals to the tune of like $40 million a year. There is a B&O rate increase specific to providers that's $15 million a year. A variety of sales taxes on services that hospitals use is going to cost hospitals $15 to $20 million a year. I mean, all told, the policies the Democrats passed last session are going to cost hospitals over $300 million a year. And this is after they've already been struggling immensely due to some of the COVID-related policies that affected how their finances operated. So they've been struggling for years and got hit with $300 million in lower revenue and added costs just last session because of House Democratic policies. So I think part of what's going on here is how hospitals are looking for a way to stem the bleeding, and I think the majority party is the ones responsible for that bleeding. But it cuts both ways. I think the pharmaceutical companies are rightly concerned that they participate in this program voluntarily. When it started in the 1990s, it was at the impetus of the pharmaceutical companies themselves. But I think they want some assurances that when they're selling these drugs at very steep discounts, oftentimes for pennies, that benefit is accruing to the patients themselves and not just padding hospitals' bottom lines. So it's difficult. I hope we get it right. It's complicated because there's this huge overlap with federal policy. That if we were to do this entirely on our own as a state, we might come up with entirely different rules. But because there's this federal overlay, we're very limited on what we can do. It's possible we might not be able to do anything. Hospitals point to a couple court cases that show the state has got a limited ability to regulate here. But pharmaceutical companies point to another set of court cases that show no, states really can't regulate anything here. So we'll see what's happening, but Senator Braun's right. I mean, we want to ultimately make sure that this works in a way that doesn't increase healthcare prices for anyone and provides the most benefit possible to those who need it the most. We also want to make sure that we're not destroying hospitals' finances any more than have already been destroyed by the majority party. And we also want to make sure that we're not punishing pharmaceutical companies and making it difficult for them to invest their revenue to innovate and create new drugs that are going to save and improve lives.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And next we will go to Shauna Sowersby with the Seattle Times. Shauna, do you have a question for us today?
I do. I have a couple of questions. Good morning, everybody. Yesterday there was a bill that was heard in the Senate that would eliminate interest on medical debt. And I'm wondering where each of your caucuses stands, whether you support that or not.
Go ahead, Drew.
I'm sorry, Sean. I've not yet seen the bill. I need to look at it. Like I said a second ago to Jonathan, I mean, we want to make sure that folks have access to affordable health care. But I need to look at the bill. As I said in the setup to Jonathan's question, healthcare policy is complicated. There's several legs of the stool, and I mean, just as an easy example. When the legislature passes a mandate to say a certain kind of drug needs to be covered or a certain kind of service needs to be covered, that can be great because a lot of people really need that service. But that comes with a cost, and that means that healthcare is going to be more costly for the people that are paying for the coverage. It's a really, really delicate balancing act. Appreciate the effort to want to make sure that it's not unaffordable for folks, and obviously eliminating medical interest on medical debt would do that, but need to look at the bill and understand what sort of second and third order effects it would have on the entire system, in terms of not just affordability to the patient, but affordability to everybody else who has to pay into the system, how it impacts access, how it impacts coverage. But without having seen the bill yet, I don't know if I can opine much more extensively than that. So apologize.
I will point out.
I'll jump in a little bit on this. I haven't read the bill either, but from what I hear from my small hospitals, who are struggling to exist. When self-pay folks don't pay, they either have to file for charity care or ask for payments, and sometimes it goes to a collection agency. And I believe that medical debt or the interest on medical debt would be either through a collector or through a judgment. But when I hear that my local hospital is losing millions a year through either charity care or bad debt write-off, I understand the need for good health care, but if they can't afford it, if we have to cut services, then that's not going to be good for anybody.
I think it's important to point out that, that it's only at the very end of the process that their medical debt or interest on medical debt exists in our state already. If you, certainly if you pay your bill on time, but even if you protest it, or if you arrange payment terms with most hospitals, it's all debt for, interest free, and without any sort of incentive to work to find a way to pay it off. I fear that you're going to end up with just a huge increase in unpaid medical debt because there's no consequences. So difficult situation, one where you want to balance the needs of the citizens with the need to keep our healthcare organizations healthy, including financially healthy.
Right.
Did you have a follow-up question, Shauna?
I do, and this one is specifically for Senator Warnock. So last year you sponsored the bill that would have stopped the state from collecting disability and survivor benefits from foster youth. This year you're sponsoring another version of that bill. To my understanding, it's not as far reaching as the one last year. Can you talk a little bit about the differences, and then also talk about whether or not you would like to maybe see this bill go further in the future?
Absolutely. And we did have a good hearing on that bill. That's 5911, I believe. And it has narrowed it down to foster youth that are 18 to 21, I believe. So a smaller amount, but we need to help those foster youth who are entitled to federal benefits. We need to help them plan for their future once they get out of the foster program. And I know we last year realized that we just couldn't afford it as a state because of the budget. But in my opinion, we should not be using foster youth benefits to balance our budgets either. We don't charge other foster youth when they're in the systems, and in this regard, we're charging foster youth. So I would like to see it go further. I'm really working hard to see it get passed this year, and we need to be helping those most vulnerable. Foster youth are there not through any fault of their own, and so this is a bill that I'm absolutely passionate about. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shauna. Next, I will go to, let's see, Bill Lucia with the Washington State Standard. Bill, did you have a question today?
Sure. Yeah, I have one. There's kind of a handful of bills this session that focus on various aspects of protecting kids online. One around social media safeguards that we covered yesterday. There's also the bill that the governor is supporting around AI chatbots. Separate legislation to set age restrictions the age permission requirements, parental permission requirements for kids to use social media. It might be tough to talk about these all in a batch, but just in general, where is your caucus at in terms of believing that it's time for some stricter regulation on how kids are using social media and accessing other stuff online, particularly with AI?
I would say, at least in the Senate Republican caucus, there's philosophically there's support for the idea that we have to provide additional protections for children online. There is concern. I know we had the bill. I forget the number, Senator Frame's bill from last year, that many of us supported the idea, but we really got tripped up in the details. If we're going to do this, we have to do it in a way that doesn't get tied up in court with First Amendment suits from the social media companies or from others. I think the broad answer is support the idea, support the philosophy. Certainly want to prevent harm to children, but want to do it in the right way so that it's effective and will stand up to court challenge.
Yeah, it's the same, I think, for House Republicans. Directionally, I agree. We want to do what we can to protect the kids. I think we're also hyper cognizant of the First Amendment, and for better or worse, it protects speech, whether you like that speech or not. So we need to be careful that we're not passing something that's going to get struck down. And like Senator Braun said, a lot of the devil is in the details. The definitions are really important. AI has sort of like just rocketed to the forefront of public consciousness. I think mostly because of things like ChatGPT, where there's this like really easy to use user interface where folks can operate AI really, really quickly and easily. Businesses have been using AI under the hood, so to speak, for a couple decades. And so I think we need to be cognizant of, in our effort to rein in some of the technology that, the public might think about the most. We need to also not, though, catch up technology that nobody has a problem with, that we just don't realize is operating behind the scenes because none of us have a very deep technical understanding. I think one of the priorities for House Republicans in most of these technology bills is not wanting to stifle innovation. So part of that has to do with getting the definitions right. Part of it also has to do with we don't want to open this up to private right of actions, and allow every lawyer with an ad on a bus or a billboard to file a lawsuit against a large company and constrain their ability to innovate. We also want the rules to be fair, so that if a company inadvertently does something against the law, they ought to have the opportunity to fix that rather than, sort of immediately facing multi-million-dollar judgments. So we want a fair structure that protects kids, but also promotes innovation. I think that's really important in this state. So while we're directionally and philosophically aligned with the concept of protecting kids, we want to make sure we do it right. The one other thing I'll add on top of that, it's a related bill you didn't mention, but it has to do with cell phones in schools. I think the evidence is increasingly clear that kids learn a lot better when cell phones are put away. Obviously, we want to defer to local districts' ability to figure out the rules that are best for themselves, but day after day, evidence grows that those phones should be put away. I've talked about this before. Washington State's test scores are plummeting. We've got one of the lowest college-going rates in the country. We need to improve the results of our education system, especially given how much money we're funneling into it. There is a bill by Stephanie McClintock that would require school districts to adopt a cell phone policy. That doesn't necessarily require they outright prohibit them, but at least make them confront that question proactively. I think that would be a great tool to recognize the science that we've seen, follow in the lead of red and blue states that have already done this, and get cell phones out of the classrooms. Unfortunately, Democrat leadership and committee chairs are sitting on that bill and refusing to move it, even though I think the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats would support that bill if it came to the floor.
I agree with Rep. Stokesbury on that in particular, because OSPI actually has sent information out to all of our school districts asking them to look at having some type of cell phone policy. So it's my understanding quite a few school districts have already done it, including some in my region, and they're seeing a lot better test scores, and the kids not being, the amount of notifications that they get every single minute on their phones is distracting them. And so we want our kids also to be able to be safe in schools. And this bill actually just lets the school districts decide what their policy is going to be. It's not saying that the kids can't have them in their classrooms for safety. I've seen in our district alone where I've been in a classroom where the teacher just requires the kids to have their phone in their backpack in the front of the room so that they're not distracting them while they're actually learning during the day. So I think great legislation, helping our kids, trying to keep them safe at school, keep them offline.
Just a quick follow-up on the chatbot bill, specifically the AI companion chatbot bill that the governor's supporting. That as written, do you know enough about it to say if it will get any? Does it have support from either of your caucuses?
I might be aligning some of these bills, but my recollection is this was one where I think a lot of folks liked the content of the bill, but were concerned about the private right of action and the right to cure. So I think if you fix some of those technical details, I suspect a lot of Republicans would support it. If you don't fix those technical details, you're going to have a lot of folks, weighing a list of some pros and a list of some cons. And I'm not totally sure if it's not changed how folks would come down on it.
Great, thank you very much. And while that's it for the reporters who are on the call today, we have 2 questions from reporters who had to attend a committee meeting, so I'm going to share those. The first is from Drew Mickelson from King 5. His question is, Senator Peterson suggested some taxes could be increased to help balance the budget. He mentioned raising the cigarette tax, for example. What fair tax increases are you hearing may be proposed, and would there be any increases that your members would support?
I'll start with the last one first. I don't see any tax increases that our members would support. Our state, I want to remind everybody here, we are not in a recession. Our revenue is growing, at least for the time being. But every time we lay one more tax at the feet of the business community to absorb, not only does that make it harder for them to be successful, it also passes a lot of cost on to our constituents. And we've talked a lot about affordability. That's the wrong direction for affordability. And we could have, specific discussions about specific taxes if desired. I made some comments earlier about the proposed income tax. I think it's highly destructive for our state's economy. The people of the state of Washington will be poorly served long term. With regard to the cigarette tax, I don't think they're going to really raise a lot of money from it. The real driver on that has always been health related, and I just think the advocates misunderstand what will become of this. We already have the highest cigarette tax in the country. Adding to that is not going to change people's minds. Research shows not going to make a big difference on whether people continue to smoke cigarettes or not. And I'm not a big fan of smoking, but we're not going to change people who are addicted to cigarettes just by making the price higher. What we're going to do is we're going to hit the poor in our state the hardest. The most regressive tax in our state's inventory is the cigarette tax. And the idea that they want to preach about progressivity and then try to raise the cigarette tax, it's just wrong, I guess is how I would put that. And will simply drive more cost to the poorest among us, or drive them to buy those cigarettes in illegal markets with the associated health risks.
Yeah, I've yet to hear of a tax proposal that I think Republicans would support. There's been a lot of taxes proposed. You mentioned the cigarette tax. Senator Brown alluded to he made a couple points I want to reiterate. One is it's extremely regressive. When you look at the rankings that show Washington, number 49 or number 50 in terms of the regressivity of the state's tax codes, one of the main drivers of that is our quote unquote sin taxes. So the reason why we have among the most regressive taxes overall is because we have an extremely regressive set of taxes on things like cigarettes. Why you would raise that and make that even more regressive at a time you're claiming to want to make your tax code more progressive is beyond me. It's also just an incredibly schizophrenic approach to taxation of tobacco in the first place. Senator Brown alluded to the fact maybe the reason you'd want to tax some of this activity is for health reasons. But if you look at the types of tobacco from cigarettes to vaping to pouches, there is I think they exist along a spectrum with perhaps more or less harm depending on where on the spectrum those things are. A lot of these devices can really serve as smoking cessation tools and allow smokers to progressively adapt to less harmful uses of tobacco. But our tax code is so schizophrenic, we are taxing the less harmful activity more than we're taxing the more harmful activity. It doesn't make a lot of sense to layer more cigarette tax on top of that. Doesn't make a lot of sense. One of the bills floating around in the Senate would specifically increase taxes on menthol cigarettes more than regular cigarettes, which is, again, confusing, and I think some folks would find has some racial undertones given the demographics of who smokes menthol cigarettes. So again, very, very confusing tax policy there. Like I said, though, there's a long list of taxes Democrats want to raise. I mentioned the new tax on tires in House Bill 2421 a second ago. There's a property tax increase back on the docket this session, another REIT increase, another B&O tax increase, a wireless device tax that Representative Gregerson keeps pushing, a cell phone line tax, Airbnb tax, authorization of a new county B&O tax, animal control tax, a new tax on your utilities to fund a wildfire mitigation fund. Democrats have not run out of ideas of taxes to raise, but none of those are going to make Washington more affordable for the people that are struggling most to afford to live in Washington.
Thank you very much. And our final question comes from Simone Carter from McClatchy. Senate Bill 6002 is receiving a hearing this morning. It's a bipartisan bill that would restrict the retention of automatic license plate readers, or ALPRs, data by police departments. Senator Holy is a co-sponsor on the bill, but it has also received criticism from law enforcement officials. I'm curious what your caucuses think of this proposal.
So I haven't seen the bill, but I do have concerns. I mean, law enforcement uses one of the many tools law enforcement uses to try to enforce the laws that we pass through the legislative process. If we don't like the law, we should change the law. But the idea that we want to restrict their ability to enforce the law seems counterintuitive to me. And one that gives me pause in supporting the bill. That said, I haven't read the bill. I think it's fair to have a hearing and see what the advocates and the detractors have to say before we make a final decision. But on the face of it, the concerns by law enforcement officers, at least in my district, raise concerns with me.
Yeah, echo Senator Braun. Haven't had a chance to read the bill yet, so not an expert on the nuances, but in broad strokes, as we've talked about before, Washington has among the highest crime rates in the country. In a variety of categories, our crime rates are increasing faster than the national average. In nearly every category, we're doing worse than we were, say, 5 years ago. To fix that, we need to do a variety of things. We've talked a lot about the need to hire more police officers. The legislature tried to do that a little bit. I think the way we did it was pretty stilted, and you haven't really seen that bill manifests itself in any outcomes for communities yet, but we'll stay tuned. We need to have more public defenders so that the time to trial isn't as long as it is. We need county prosecutors willing to actually prosecute crime and not just send folks on their merry way. All those are part of the solution, but among the things, we need to give law enforcement the tools they need to solve these crimes. And technology has given us a tremendous ability to solve crimes that, decades ago were unsolvable. DNA evidence wasn't something we used until somewhat recently. Now it is a very common tool to solve crimes. Same thing with this camera data. We certainly understand the need to respect folks' privacy, but that also needs to be weighed against community safety. And we need to give law enforcement officers the tools to solve these crimes. I think you talk to these agencies, talk to sheriffs and police chiefs, they will tell you story after story of how these cameras have enabled them to solve crimes, and these cameras were the only evidence that provided the links necessary to solve those things. So I think we ought to be awfully careful about rolling back some of these tools that have proven to be an effective way to help lower Washington crimes rates. So I've got some concerns, but we'll keep looking at it.
And on a personal note, just in the Tri-Cities alone, our sheriffs and police chiefs have been saying that these cameras are really helping in our districts. They recently solved a hit and run accident. They also solved a robbery in Prosser, Washington. And so right now, listening to our law enforcement agents and how this is really helping has been an important voice in my district.
Terrific. Anybody else have any comment on this question? No? All right, well then we will wrap up for today. Thank you everybody for joining us, and I will turn it to Senator Braun and Representative Stokesbury for final comments.
All right, well, thank you everybody for being here. Only second week of the session, a lot of work to do, but your Your attendance and interest in the issues that we're considering here in Olympia is much appreciated. I'll just remind everyone our priorities remain affordability, 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 and you can't make Washington more affordable by adding all the new taxes that our Democratic colleagues continue to propose. You can only balance the budget in a sustainable way by actually getting in and doing the work to control the cost growth and living within our means, and not get ourselves stuck into a downward spiral where we solve a deficit with taxes, have less revenue, more taxes, bigger deficit, and it just spirals into a less economic opportunity for everyone in our state. That said, have a great day, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, I agree with all that. House Republicans are also laser focused on making Washington more affordable. So appreciate you all attending today. Appreciate your coverage, and I hope as you continue your coverage for the next 50 days or so, you cover these affordability issues. When there are bills that would make Washington more affordable that aren't getting hearings, I hope you talk about that and ask why. And when there are bills that are going to make Washington more affordable, raise taxes, impose regulations that raise prices, I hope you talk about those as well. Public deserves to be informed, and appreciate your role in that. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week.